Did the Secret Service use the press corps and some White House staffers as sitting ducks to help protect the life of the president? Or did it just take a security measure that it has used before and everyone was equally safe? These are directly opposing claims about a maneuver the White House pulled off last month. President Trump boarded a plane in Turkey filled with staff and reporters, then was secretly shuffled off the plane and into a catering truck, and then loaded onto another military aircraft. When news broke about this in recent days, the mainstream media went one way while the president's defenders went another. Nowhere in that mess do you get clarity on what's true. It's a huge story involving alleged life and death stakes and accusations that the Secret Service and the president were willing to risk the lives of journalists and staffers. The reporting has been filled with conjecture and baseless claims. Today, I'll take you through what we know about this flight and a previous example of a president switching planes. President Clinton. I spoke with Joe Lockhart, his former press secretary. You'll hear from him ahead. Plus, a news giant seems to have invented a threat level for this whole thing.
The New York Times reporting originally was extremely clear, right? It was that the imminent threat was to whatever plane Trump was believed to be flying on.
No, it wasn't. I'll explain. And another major news organization introduced the idea of conspiracy theories into this story, blissfully unaware of how they and other mainstream news agencies fuel conspiracy theories all the time. This whole story was also a giant missed opportunity. The media could use it to educate people about really important things going on in America and the world. In this case, what they missed involves nuclear threats, 9/11, and a giant event from the 20th century, an event that was formative in shaping the world as we know it. But most people don't even know it happened. I went digging and pulled up archival sound for you. Also today, another group is found to be secretly removing terrorists from its list of so-called journalists killed in Gaza. All that and how the media is becoming like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. Coming up on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you. My name is Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. I spent 20 years in mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN, where I became the lead on-air fact-checker. But I've always seen how incredibly much is wrong with the mainstream media, how much information you're given that's just not true. This show tackles that massive problem. Along with the show comes a newsletter. It's free, and there's a lot of extra content that paid subscribers get. To see what those perks are, just check out the link in the show notes. I always try to thank one of the latest paid subscribers. Let's see here. Alan Hamer became one. Thank you. And when you do that, you have the option of putting in a note. He writes, "Keep telling the truth, Josh, and fight hypocrisy." Oh, it's so nice. Thank you. Also, I've explained on the show that due to the world of algorithms we live in, getting ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and the other platforms makes a big difference. And a bunch of you have been doing that. So thank you so much. And you know what's interesting? This says so much about the time we're living in. So Apple Podcasts has this section in which they say, well, if you're listening to this show, here are other shows you might like. So once in a while, I look at which shows it recommends to people who listen to this, what its algorithms think this show might be similar to. Those recommendations change all the time based on what I'm talking about. This says so much about the media landscape. When I point out lies from the right, Apple Podcasts recommends shows like Ezra Klein, which is crazy because I'm the opposite of Ezra Klein. I have pointed out Ezra Klein lies. And then when I point out the big lies of the left, especially the moronic anti-Israel stuff that has taken over so much of the world, that's the biggest lie of the left. Then they recommend Jewish podcasts to people. So here's the point. There's no one else doing this, just talking about truth. And I don't mean that in a yay me thing. I'm talking about the media. This doesn't exist. A look at just what the facts are. There's nothing that they can consistently point to that says, here's something else that just fact checks. Okay, I'm starting off today with this.
They wanted me to go on a different flight, a different plane, equal safety, but they wanted me to do it, so I do it. I do what they say.
That's Trump talking about this plane switch thing. Here's the deal. Trump was on a trip to Turkey. He and White House staff and the press got on the plane, but now the Washington Post has reported that he didn't stay on the plane. He and a few others were snuck out the other side and onto a catering truck and then into another military aircraft. And this all has to do with some kind of threat from Iran. Now, some people are saying that he and the Secret Service obviously didn't care about the security of the people who were on the plane because they were the decoy while he was flying separately. But it's not that simple. First, this was not a new idea. Presidents have switched planes before. We don't know all the details in each case. Some people point to a case in 2000. President Clinton was in India and was going to fly to Pakistan. There were threats from groups in Pakistan, so there were security concerns about what might happen mid-flight. Clinton ended up flying on a different plane. But in this whole story, the details are the key. The concern here is where any potential attackers think a president is. In this case, with Trump, any attackers who were following this would have thought that he was on the jet he had boarded with everyone else. Back in 2000, did that happen? Did Clinton secretly sneak off of that plane? It's not so clear. Clinton's press secretary at the time was Joe Lockhart. He says the Secret Service wanted to do the same thing back then. They wanted to sneak Clinton and a few other people off the plane. Keep in mind, it's the job of the Secret Service to protect a small handful of people. Joe Lockhart says he spoke out at the time and said, no, we're not doing that. And he says he believes that if Clinton had been brought into that conversation, Clinton would have said the same thing. So he says they chose to do something different, that they had Clinton walk around that jet in India, that he was not seen boarding it, and that if anyone was looking, they wouldn't know which other aircraft Clinton might have then been taken onto. So if anyone was there in India watching and feeding information to any attackers, the way Joe describes it, they would have seen that Clinton was not on that plane with reporters and other staff. I spoke with Joe. I'll tell you, he was on a very scratchy phone line, but here's what he told me.
Some of this was an act for everyone, but the act was to show everyone that he wasn't getting on the plane with the staff and the press, and he was getting on a plane that they couldn't see.
So that would be a huge difference from what happened with Trump. In looking at this situation with Trump in Turkey, Joe has used the term human shields. And on Facebook, he called it cowardice. He wrote shame on the president and the Secret Service. Joe also says at the time they informed the president of the White House Correspondents Association, who was on this trip. She was one of the reporters on the trip. Her name is Susan Page. She is now USA Today Washington bureau chief, and she posted a video about it.
Clinton officials took me aside beforehand to brief me about the extraordinary security measures that were going to be taken. That honors a tradition that the White House keep the press corps, or at least their representatives, informed about the president's whereabouts and well-being. That tradition is particularly important in times of crisis and war.
So she backs up the idea that she was told in advance. That is significant. This time with Trump, no reporters were told. Back then, at least one was. However, she differs from Joe Lockhart when it comes to what happened with the plane. In addition to that video, she also wrote about this for USA Today. Here's something she wrote. As far as I know, I was the only journalist who was aware of the president's plane switch. Of course, when he landed, the world realized he had switched to the unmarked plane. So she believes the world did not know. I went looking for archival video. Is there any proof of what was reported at the time when Clinton was getting on the plane? And I haven't found any. Okay, so if Susan Page is right, Then while that plane was in the air back in 2000, the world thought Clinton was in it. And if there was any threat, then maybe that threat would have been targeted at the plane. Now, it's very possible that at the time, amid all the confusion, people had different impressions of what message might be sent from where Clinton was standing or walking. Anyway, it seems that what happened now with Trump is that the Secret Service recommended the same thing it recommended back in 2000. And Trump said, okay. And this time, they didn't tell anyone what had happened. There was no moment when Trump got back when the White House said, hey, let's tell the world how we had you on a different plane. Maybe other presidents have done exactly what Trump did here. The only reason we know Trump did this is that people leaked it to the Washington Post. Maybe other presidents did this and no one leaked it. Joe Lockhart told me he thinks that's probable. There's an even bigger question about all of this. How big was the threat? Was it even a big threat at all? The Washington Post reports that the CIA had low confidence in any threat. So maybe the Secret Service made the call that it was not too dangerous to fly, and also out of an abundance of caution, they moved the president in keeping with their mission for yet another layer of safety to ensure the continuity of the government. But CNN has been portraying this very differently.
I just want to be clear here. The New York Times reporting originally was extremely clear, right? It was that the imminent threat was to whatever plane Trump was believed to be flying on. So the White House made every effort for everyone on the planet to believe that the plane that Trump is on was the plane that all the reporters were on and his own staff was on, even though they took him off.
That was CNN host Erin Burnett. You heard an important term in there, imminent threat. She used those words a bunch of times throughout that hour. In that clip, she attributed it to the New York Times, but there's no sign that the Times ever said that. Of course, the Times gets things wrong all the time, so even if they had said it, it could be wrong, but there's no sign that the Times ever used the words imminent threat. This is really important. That term isn't just a description, it's an official designation that government agencies sometimes use. Was there an imminent threat to the plane that some White House staffers and reporters were on? This isn't the only way that CNN pushed this. CNN's Jake Tapper tweeted the term. He wrote, no officials I've spoken to have ever before heard of using an Air Force One full of White House staff and journalists as a decoy during an imminent threat. I replied asking where he was getting imminent threat from. I got no answer, of course. A bunch of news agencies ran with Jake Tapper's quote without questioning it. So there's a bunch of reports out there that include the words imminent threat about this plane, but only as a quote from Jake Tapper, which he doesn't even attribute to anyone. He's just saying it himself. Then the media did what the media does. It used anonymous sources to make things even more confusing. Reporting these days becomes like choose your own adventure books. Which thing do you want to believe? We'll give you that option. Here's what happened next. Reuters came out with a report which offers you two anonymous sources who give different descriptions of how big a threat this even was. We have no clue who these people are, what agencies they work for. One says that the Secret Service did think there was an imminent threat. But another one says there was no clear plan by people hostile to Trump for executing a threat, only an intent, which is why the planes were allowed to fly. So, short version, the media is giving you a lot of conjecture and making a mess of this story. It is quite possible that in this era, the Secret Service wants to put a tighter lid than it used to on security operations. After all, in this era, unlike in 2000, one person could tell one other person who then puts it on social media and boom, the whole world knows. Other presidents across the decades have also done plain switcheroos, and we don't know all the details. Of course, all of this comes against a backdrop of the worst relationship between a president and the press that I've ever seen. Trump has antagonized the media throughout both his terms, calling the media the enemy of the people. It is not the enemy of the people. In fact, when it does its job, it's supposed to be working for the people. So that antagonism, hatred, that is the context behind some people in the media reading this as His disdain runs so deep that he doesn't even care about the survival of people on the plane. What does Trump say about all this? Well, remember what I played for you earlier? He says the planes were equally safe. He then contradicted himself by saying this.
Actually, the plane that I flew on was at greater risk.
Why do you say that?
Risk because that would be the plane I think that they would be more likely to go for.
There's no reason to believe that. I mean, if any attackers thought he was on the other plane, why would the plane he was actually on be under more of a threat? But this is where we are. Here's one other thing Joe Lockhart said to me.
In 2000, there was a high level of trust between my office and the media. That doesn't exist anymore.
In a functional democracy, politicians and the media would be at loggerheads, but never worried that they'd risk each other's lives. Question for you. In all the chatter about this plane thing, has any report made all this clear to you? Literally any report, anywhere from these billion-dollar news giants?
Extra, extra, we do about it.
News used to spread like this.
Extra, extra, we do about it.
But in this era, it comes at us from all directions all day long.
Some breaking news.
Officials are investigating.
Breaking news.
More updates coming soon.
And so many people are weighing in with opinions and theories, spewing uninformed nonsense all around us. It's like we're caught in this cacophony of noise. Big media is a big part of the problem. They're getting more desperate to be heard in all that noise and setting aside journalism to say, hey, pay attention to us over here. Humans are not designed to be overwhelmed with information like this. It's mentally unhealthy. This show aims to end that. I think of it like coming along with a triangle and saying, let's all take a deep breath and focus on truth. For this block of time, all that noise is gone. Together, we focus on facts plus context, so we can make decisions in the world based on what's really going on, not what liars want us to believe. That is the blueprint for every episode I produce. If you value that formula and believe it should reach more people, please consider supporting the show at whatever level works for you. Find out how at the link in the show notes or at my website, joshlebs.com. Your support makes all this work possible. This whole situation involving Trump and the trip back from Turkey was already in the news for a whole other reason. I told you about it at the time. That was in episode, 118, titled The Media's One Night Stand. If you haven't heard that, I encourage you to go back and listen. Listen to every episode from the very beginning and make sure that everyone you've ever met does the same thing. Anyway, here are some basics. Trump has a new plane given to him by Qatar, a $400 million gift from an Islamist anti-democratic monarchy, which is insane. But he took it and plans to keep it afterward for his own library. For the trip back from Turkey, he and his staff and the traveling press pool were going to take that plane. But then that plan changed. They took the previous jet used as Air Force One. Anonymous sources told the New York Times that was for security reasons involving Iran, and that raised questions about whether the new plane is adequately secure. The Department of Justice briefly tried to subpoena New York Times staffers to find out who those sources were, which is ridiculous and an affront to press freedom. A judge rebuked the DOJ, and the DOJ dropped those subpoenas. So, we, the public, at that point, were told that everyone flew back on the old Air Force One jet. Now, it turns out Trump wasn't on that plane either, because he and a few other people were shuffled onto another aircraft. That one went to the UK, where he actually got on the Qatari gifted jet for the flight home. Note what is causing all of this mess. There was a danger from Iran. All right, now before I was telling you about a case in 2000, then there was a danger from Pakistan. If the media wanted to educate you, they would point out the similarities here. This is such an important opportunity for the media, but of course it didn't even occur to them to do that. They don't even think of getting you all the facts, let alone context. In both of these cases, why was a U.S. president in danger? Now the U.S. president faces threats from Iran, a dangerous, anti-democratic Islamist nation, the chief global sponsor of terrorism, a nation trying to build nuclear weapons. Back in 2000, Clinton and the others faced a threat from Pakistan, which was at that point under its latest military anti-democratic Islamist government that has nuclear weapons and links to terrorism. That year, the Clinton administration warned it might list Pakistan as a state sponsor of terrorism. When it failed to do that, lots of critics said it should have. And the next year, of course, Islamist terrorists with links to Pakistan carried out the September 11th attacks. The so-called mastermind of that, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was a Pakistani citizen raised in Kuwait with deep ties to Pakistan. The 9/11 Commission's report mentioned Pakistan hundreds of times. I'm looking at a few examples here. It says Pakistan helped nurture the Taliban. Pakistan's military intelligence service was the Taliban's primary patron. Okay, so in both these cases that have been in the news lately, we've got Islamist governments that present nuclear dangers and threaten U.S. presidents for trying to do anything to limit those dangers. And this could be an opportunity for people to learn where these countries even come from. I've told you about Iran in the past and how, in its current form, it was founded in 1979 through this takeover. Back in 2000, when Clinton had his flight, Pakistan was still a very new country, just barely 50 years old.
In Karachi, capital of the newly created Muslim state of Pakistan.
That is sound from a Universal Archival newsreel from 1947. Pakistan wasn't an old place gaining independence. It was a new concept. It was an idea in the 1930s that a few people had to create another Muslim state. So they created it and used an acronym for it, Pakistan, but that was hard to pronounce, so they added an I. An estimated 15 million people were displaced when India and Pakistan were founded, the largest displacements in human history. Tons of people were killed. Some estimates say 2 million people were killed in violence. No one talks about this. That same year, Israel accepted a partition plan, and unlike Pakistan, Israel had existed as an independent nation before all these empires took it over across millennia. It wasn't some new idea. And as I've reported before, all the nations surrounding Israel were founded at the same time. It was literal decolonization. This isn't an opinion. That's just literally what happened. Empires were falling. But these screaming, dangerous anti-Semitic protesters don't know or care what happened anywhere else. They've invented an idea that Israel is the opposite of what it is. That brings us back to these presidential threats. Islamist governments present real threats to the United States. Who warned the Trump administration that there was some possibility of an attack in this case? Well, as usual, they got their warning from Israel. Now, that doesn't mean Israel was saying it was some urgent or imminent thing or whatever. It just means that they pass along intelligence, as Israel does all the time. The United States and Israel gain so much from intelligence cooperation, which comes along with the military cooperation, helping thwart attacks and keeping people safe from attacks by Islamist anti-democratic governments and the many terrorist groups that they sponsor. That is what happened here. And what the Trump administration did with that information, that's entirely up to the United States. But information about potential threats does not always come from our own U.S. intelligence services. Those partnerships are essential. I've been looking at the media coverage on this, and here's what happens consistently. Some of these far left places are mentioning that it was Israeli intelligence and smushing that together in a headline saying that the U.S. had low confidence in the threat, because they want to make it sound like the U.S. has low confidence in Israeli intelligence. The places that are pushing the idea that this was some dangerous imminent threat, they're not mentioning the fact that the intelligence came from Israel, or they're burying it, because that could make cooperation with Israel look really important. They don't want to do that. It's all about agenda. Meanwhile, NPR reported on this whole thing with Trump's plane. Here is something NPR said.
White House journalists traveling with the president actually serve a function as independent witnesses. So the American people don't just have to take the government's word for it. This is something past administrations have understood and valued. And now, in a time of war and rampant conspiracy theories, this matters even more.
It certainly does matter. We need the truth. And the media pushes conspiracy theories all the time. The cognitive dissonance of NPR complaining about rampant conspiracy theories, just mind-boggling given how much NPR and other major news agencies push conspiracy theories. There are so many examples of this. Let's just take one, CBS. I follow the news for you. I'm constantly looking at what major news agencies report. As I have told you, the mainstream media keeps presenting CBS as some newly MAGA thing in Trump's pocket that lets him nix stories. It's literally not happening. CBS is filled with critical coverage of Trump. But people don't know that. Other mainstream media have created this idea that CBS is somehow conspiring with the Trump administration to fool Americans. It's not happening. Here's another one. Excellent military analyst Andrew Fox has been on this show a couple of times. He breaks down what's going on in the Middle East better than anyone else. And he has been railing against the insane conspiracy theories that push things like this nonsensical idea of genocide in Gaza. It's factually not happening. Here's one of Andrew's latest posts, and I'll share it with you in the newsletter. He writes, "Now we know that the population of Gaza increased since the war began, and a comparatively tiny proportion of non-combatants died." And here's the figures for all this. He says now people are engaging in rhetorical sleight of hand to try to keep the hoax going even as it falls apart. There are so many examples like this. But yes, media, tell us how very much you care about knocking down conspiracy theories. As a rule, I don't do social media battles, and I encourage other people not to as well. They're generally just a waste of time. But social media can be a great tool to get people truth. In fact, social media is an important tool to fight back in the mimetic warfare and influencing brand connectomes, two things you've heard about on this show. You can find me on social media. On most of the platforms, I have my name. And since I am no expert at creating pretty graphics, I am happy to say that a listener to this show is now helping me with the content I'm sharing on Instagram. He is at Gabe Draws, Gabe Draws. He is awesome. Thank you, Gabe. So if you are on social media platforms, find me at Josh Lebs. You will see that sometimes somebody posts a lie and I reply and I say, that's factually untrue. Here are some facts. But that's not a battle because I don't go back and look at whether they even replied to that. So not wasting my time on that. Focusing on putting this together for you. But I see your shares, your likes, the way you amplify that content, and it helps drive the audience for this show. So let's hook up there on the social media platforms at Josh Lebs, JoshLevs. A couple weeks ago, I told you that the Committee to Protect Journalists voted to keep listing members of terror groups as journalists. That way, its list of so-called journalists killed in Gaza becomes way longer than it should be. And that suits the group's narrative. I also explained that the CPJ did stealthily remove some names from its list. Well, the CPJ is not alone in doing that. Reporters Without Borders has been quietly removing some names from its list as well, even as it keeps other terrorists on its list. A terrific group called Honest Reporting has been tracking this. All the news giants still cite information from these groups. The CPJ, Reporters Without Borders, and others doing similar things. They treat these groups as the unassailable, unquestionable record. Think about how that plays out against what I've told you about today. In this whole plane fiasco thing, reporters are saying, oh no, the Secret Service and Trump left us at risk of an attack from Iran or one of the many proxy groups that Iran has that carry out terrorist attacks. Oh no, we could have been killed. Meanwhile, those same news agencies count members of those exact same groups as journalists. The news media is actively helping to legitimize and grow support for the same terrorist organizations that threaten them. It's a powerful reminder that all these hypocritical moves by the media, all the propaganda they push, all of it operates against the freedom that they count on, the freedom that you and I count on. It all operates against democracy. As always, I want to know what you think. There are two great ways to reach me. The best is through the newsletter. Only paid subscribers can message me and post in the comments. That is the first place I look for topics for this show. You all inspire many of the topics. It's your questions and your comments at the newsletter. So I check there first. And the second is a form at my website. It's a really cool form that blocks out haters and spammers because it sends you a code as you're filling it out. You'll see. You'll find the links to those in the show notes. The newsletter is theystandcorrected.substack.com. And my website is joshlebs.com. Don't hold back. Send me what you're thinking. I love hearing from you. I read every message. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.